You spend hours working in isolation. You stress test the numbers, you anticipate the objections, and you build an airtight logical sequence. Then you walk into the conference room to present. Except the group is running late, they're exhausted from a previous call, or there is a palpable, unspoken tension hanging over the table. You start speaking, and within 90 seconds, you can feel it missing the mark. The data is entirely accurate, but the message is sliding right off them. It is a uniquely frustrating position. You put in the precise work required, and now you are sitting there feeling unfairly judged by leadership or your peers. If you are a highly analytical person, your immediate reflex is to scan your own slides for the error. You assume there must be a gap in the logic you presented. But the problem is rarely on the screen. It is visible in the room. People are looking at their phones, just staring blankly, or cutting you off with questions that ignore your main points. Highly analytical people often misdiagnose this failure. They assume the rejection is a referendum on their competence, when the disconnect actually stems from a failure of environmental fit. When smart people sense this kind of rejection, they naturally default to what they trust most. They apply more logic. You might find yourself pointing more aggressively at a single graph, reiterating a timeline, or pushing a statistic harder to force the group to understand. This is the content fallacy, the belief that a stronger argument will automatically overcome the friction of a hostile or apathetic room. Pushing rigid logic into a fluctuating environment does not bridge the gap. It widens the emotional distance between you and everyone at the table. We are treating social dynamics as observable communication mechanics. In these scenarios, the technical analysis remains sound, but the delivery lacks coordination with the group's immediate reality. Influence relies on the counterintuitive principle that logic is ineffective without first achieving coordination with the social field. Any group of humans operates with a measurable collective state. That state is determined by immediate variables: the current pace of conversation, the baseline skepticism, an underlying anxiety, or a shared fatigue. This creates the emotional fact of the room, a reality that exists regardless of what is printed on the meeting agenda. Humans are hypersensitive to social mismatch. We rapidly detect when someone is out of sync with the group's baseline. If your opening ignores the obvious emotional fact in the room, you signal a lack of awareness that the audience finds jarring. The audience interprets this mismatch as a signal of low situational awareness. Once a group perceives low awareness, they become inherently skeptical of the speaker's data. You can have the most robust analysis in the company, but if the delivery is mismatched, the information will not be absorbed. Influence requires operating on the same frequency as your target. The mismatch penalty functions as a filter. If you demonstrate that you cannot read the room's current state, the room will often refuse to trust your roadmap for the future. When highly capable people sense the room slipping away, they typically default to 3 tactical errors. The first error is launching straight into the slide deck to let the work speak for itself. This often reads as hiding behind the data and avoiding the human friction in the room. The second error is talking faster, attempting to bulldoze through the sensed resistance before someone interrupts. Increased speed simply reads as defensiveness, which raises the room's tension. The third error is performing high-energy enthusiasm to artificially lift a tired group. To a stressed or exhausted audience, unwarranted enthusiasm reads as deeply tone-deaf. These standard reflexes fail because they are unilateral actions that ignore the baseline, ultimately widening the communication gap. The core behavioral alternative is the observation and alignment opening. This involves naming the current situation plainly, without adding drama or judgment. It can be as simple as calmly noting a shared exhaustion at the end of a long day, or acknowledging a specific bottleneck that just occurred in the meeting. The primary mechanic here is matching the room's tempo early, before you attempt to steer it. Matching tempo proves you are in the same reality as the audience, which helps lower their defensive filters. Once aligned, you can effectively present your data and begin listening for the real question behind the group's questions. You cannot alter a group's direction or opinion until you have mechanically proven that you have matched their starting point. There is a specific challenge in rooms that are not just tired, but actively hostile or deeply skeptical. In these environments, standard logic tends to bounce off the audience. In conflict-heavy settings, mirroring and labeling can be a useful mechanic for de-escalation. This involves reflecting the audience's content back to them while calmly naming the underlying emotion. Directly, Research into high-stakes negotiation suggests that accurately naming an emotion can help de-escalate it by shifting cognitive load. This works for some people because it validates the current reality, though it requires absolute sincerity to be effective. Accurately labeling a room's hostility doesn't validate their anger, but it can reduce the escalation enough for your actual data to finally be heard. Strong analytical content is necessary, but calibration is what allows that content to be heard. Before you speak in your next group setting, pause to run a 30-second internal scan. First, what is the exact pace of the room right now? Second, what is the primary unspoken doubt or skepticism hanging in the air? And third, what exactly happened emotionally in this room over the last 2 minutes? Let your very first spoken sentence reflect the answers to these scans. Align yourself with reality before presenting a single piece of data. If you take one thing from this, before your next contribution in a group, take half a minute to notice pace, skepticism, and the last emotional beat. Let your first line acknowledge the reality in the room. Content matters, but fit is what lets content through.